Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video we have an insightful presentation by esteemed astrologer Dorothy looking at the United States solar return for 2024. And lastly, if you wish to view our current class, workshop and webinar offerings, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
So I want to introduce Dorothy Oha. Dorothy is a certified professional astrologer, international lecturer, consultant, writer, and teacher. Her specialties include individual consultations, surgery elections, and relationship compatibility using the Davison chart. And Dorothy will be teaching on that in the fall, I believe. Yes. Is that right? Yes.
That's right.
Yes. So Dorothy is a faculty member of the International Academy of Astrology and Kepler College. She's the author of Planetary Resonance, Everything Leaves a Trace, and Computer Reports, Compatibility and Conflict for Romantic Relationships and Friendship and Business with Cosmic Patterns. She's the founder of the Relationship Club, which lectures on relationship astrology. Her news magazine, Planet Weather, has been going on for 27 years, and it includes social and political commentary, and it's hosted on Dorothy's website, Substack site, which is right there, dorothy.substack.com. You can find her there. And then her community service includes the past chair of APAN's Legal Information Committee and 16 years on the ISAR board. She's the chair of ethics and developer of the Ethics Awareness Training. Dorothy is writing a book on the Davison relationship chart. Can't wait to see that. And you can find Dorothy at her different website and social media below, but I know that Ray's going to put those also in the chat box, so you'll be able to get those. So I am going to stop sharing and turn the webinar over to Dorothy. Welcome, Dorothy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. And we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to share my screen here with you, and we'll get going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know, Dorothy, we were talking before we started, or before we opened the room, that you're using the Sibley chart today for the United States.
Yes, exactly. And I'll tell you why. I know that there are many US charts around, and everyone has an opinion as to which is the best chart. What convinced me of the Sibley chart was 9/11, when in the Sibley chart, Pluto was right on the ascendant. So that convinced me, among other things historically. But the US solar return for 2024, let's go. All right, so just briefly, because most of you know this or can find this out on your own, but the exact moment each year when the sun returns to the same degree and minute as in the birth chart, that is what constitutes the solar return. It also does not always occur on the actual birth date, because the exact motion, is not totally exact 365 days. So the solar return offers a blueprint for the coming year. What's being accentuated, the potential challenges, the benefits and the blessings. We tend to overlook the blessings because we're very preoccupied a lot of times, with the stresses and the strains, but there are blessings, and there are always antidotes in the chart, natural antidotes, and I'm going to be speaking to those as well. I also like to call the solar return the cosmic request for the year, because that chart, it's a natal chart. Think of it as a natal chart. It's asking you to direct your attention in a certain arena, and it's showing you what the task for the year ahead is. Now, this is all potential, just like a natal chart. So it's up to you, and in this case, it's up to the country, whether they're going to meet the potential and at what level that potential is going to be met, right? As astrologers, we're always trying to lead our clients to what's the highest expression of a particular energy, and how can we modify, how can we work with a stressful energy? So here are some notations before we actually look at the chart. This is what I ask you to consider. first of all, the sun's placement, everything about the sun's placement and aspects, the house it's in, the house it rules. I mean, this is a solar return. It's not a lunar return. It's not a Mars return. It's not a Saturn return. It's a solar return. So the sun is really highlighted here, and it's the first consideration. Then we go to the moon. The moon, of course, is the mood. You know, it's the partner of the sun. Then the chart ruler, or which is the ascendant ruler, and that is a very important planet in any chart. And then the angles and the nodes. So if you just start working with that, all of that is going to lead you into the rest of the chart dynamics, right? You cannot read a solar return for anybody without relating it to their natal chart, because that will reinforce, the house distribution. It will reinforce a lot of the points in the solar return, see how they match up with the natal. All of that is important. I mean, there's so much that we can discuss about the solar return that I can't possibly get into, in this 90 minutes. But you can compare every planet in the solar return to the natal planet to see, is there going to be more tension in that planet? Are the Mars square to each other? Are the moons in conjunct each other? All of that matters. So we want to look at everything. But I'm going to give you the most important highlights, which in fact is actually going to be quite a bit anyway. So that leads me to this here. Where is the solar return ascendant degree in the natal chart of the United States? That means that that environment in the United States chart is going to be highlighted, because that is the ascendant, the temporary ascendant for the coming year. So another rule of thumb, or something easy, is 3 months later, when the sun squares the sun, okay, as we go through the year, it reactivates everything. It reactivates the solar potential and everything that we're going to talk about as to what the solar potential is this year. So, that's just something that we want to keep in mind, besides the very, very important triggers to the solar return throughout the year that we will also discuss. So as I said, solar returns must be read in combination with the natal chart for a complete analysis. So create a double wheel. And we'll look at the double wheel both ways. First of all, to get where the solar return ascendant falls, and then putting the natal chart around the solar return, because the solar return is the chart for the year. So that one dominates. Okay. The question of various opinions as to the location of the solar return, I don't know if I want to totally get into that right now, but for the United States, of course, it's the seat of government, which is Washington, D.C. So let's take a first look. So this is our first look. And I don't like to populate the chart with all kinds of lines. And of course, there are more aspects, that we can look at. We could add more lines, but I wanted to point out what I consider to be the key, the core aspects this year. Okay. So the sun. The sun, of course, is 13 degrees of Cancer. It finds itself in the 8th house. Venus is close by, and the moon is also in the 8th house. So the moon is square the nodes. The moon is trine Saturn. I didn't put that in, but again, I'm working with the core here right now. These are core. So 8th house. Okay, 8th house, I consider the matrix. I consider the accumulated psychological energies that are prevalent, or political energies, the zeitgeist, the energies that are prevalent, the matrix that we're swimming in at this moment in time, eighth house. It's the psychological dynamics of any given time. And the eighth house is powerful because emotions, of course, are very powerful. Eighth house, there can be obsessiveness, there can be entrenchment, there's an idea of wanting to dominate or to overpower in some way, or to find empowerment, right? That would be a better way to talk about it. How do we find the empowerment of the country at this time? How are we most powerful this year? How can we express our power in a way that serves the people? This is a Sun in Cancer country. All right, so that's just a briefly about the eighth house. When we look at a planet and we see that the Sun is in Cancer, and we see that Venus is in there, and that looks nice. The Sun is conjunct Venus, and that's nice. But it's just the beginning of the story, right? Because what we have to do is look at the dispositor. The Sun is in Cancer, so we look at the moon. And the moon is at 29 degrees of Gemini, exactly square Neptune retrograde at 29 degrees of Pisces. All right, so that changes the whole dynamic. It changes our understanding of, the Sun is, kind of widely conjunct Venus, going to be a great year. No, it's not. It's not that simple. Not only is the moon in an exact square to Neptune, they are both at an anaretic degree, the 29th degree, and I will talk about that more as we go along. But this is very, very powerful. And just to say also that in any chart, the most exact aspect holds sway. It dominates, the energy pattern. So not only do we have an exact aspect, and that is the most exact aspect in the chart, but it's at the pivotal anaretic degree of 29. Right? Okay, so then we will talk more about this because this is a very, very powerful aspect in the chart. But then we look at the moon in Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And so that takes us to Mercury at 3 Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius. So you can see that the Sun in Cancer this year, the solar potential has a tremendous amount of intense energy behind it, right? So we have to look at that. We have to look at the dispositors. And then if we look at Mercury in Leo, Leo is ruled by the Sun, takes us right back to the Sun again. So this is the little picture that I want to highlight for you, because this little pattern is very, it works together, it mixes together, it blends together in these ways that I've just described by dispositorship. And that's very, very, very important. So we also have the chart ruler, as I said, and that's Scorpio. So that would reinforce what I already said about eighth house, because there is a relationship between Scorpio and the eighth house. So, we're coming into this year with a lot of deeply held emotions, and we're being asked to look very deeply, instinctively within ourselves as a country, as to, what is power all about? How do we want to express our power? Who are we as a country? I mean, these are questions. If you look at the traditional ruler of Mars, of Scorpio, it's Mars, and there it is, hugging the descendant, and will conjunct Uranus I think on Monday, exactly. So this is a key situation showing again that the year is a Uranian type of year in the sense that there are a lot of things that have never happened before, or things that are unprecedented, things that are shocking, things that are surprising, things that are anxiety producing, right? A Mars-Uranus has a level of anxiety, and in this case, an anxiety toward our sense of stability, because Uranus and Taurus in and of itself indicates instability around the things that we always thought were stable, including our world, the world that we live in, and climate, etc. That goes with the territory of Uranus Taurus. So here we have the chart ruler, Mars, moving into a conjunction with Uranus during the solar return. And I will be talking about aspects that will perfect over the course of the year, right? So I will be talking about that. Some perfect very quickly. For instance, the sun to Saturn, the sun to Neptune, Venus to Neptune, those are very quick. They're going to happen within the month. But we're going to be looking at other aspects that are not so fast. And again, we're looking at this chart as a natal chart, and we're watching the transits as they progress over the year. So we have anxiety over here in Mars-Uranus. We certainly have anxiety in a moon square Neptune, right? All right, so I'm going to leave for now. Well, actually, let me talk about one more thing. The midheaven. The midheaven is 2 Virgo, ruled by Mercury. Takes us back to Mercury in Leo opposite Pluto, takes us back to the sun in Cancer. So you can see that Mercury is very dominant in this chart when we look at how things work out and how the dispositors operate. Mercury becomes a very strong part of the chart, and the people, Moon, are confused. Square Neptune. But confusion can lead to illumination, faith. It can lead to some kind of a spiritual evolvement, right? But we'll get into more of that. So this is basically what I've already said. So, but we have more keywords here. So I'm talking about the key aspects. And we want to look at that in every chart. We want to look at what are the key aspects, because those are the ones, that they're going to dominate, right? So Sun Cancer equals Moon Gemini, exactly square Neptune Pisces at 29. And it is the most exact aspect in the chart. What could we say about this? Cognitive dissonance, denial, fantasy, distraction, dis-ease. There is a dis-ease in the country. I'm sure that you would agree with me. And we're stressed and we're kind of feverish. There are delusions going on, and we might feel that we're lost in the maze, right? And certainly it brings uncertainty. Certainly it brings uncertainty. So, these are all of the various feelings that are being generated, by that aspect. So what we want to find is, like, how can we find stability from this dynamic square that is so powerful? And that's going to be a challenge. That's what we want to look for. Some of the other ways, with Moon Neptune are imagination. Imagine how we want things to be. Do we have faith? Can we find illumination through the fog of Neptune, right? Can we find wisdom? Can we find justice, right? these are all aspects, remember that, Pisces, the traditional ruler is Jupiter, right? So justice comes in, wisdom comes in. We're being asked to find our way through the fog, right? More with key aspects, which I've already mentioned a number of times, but so important. Moon in Gemini equals Mercury, Leo, opposite Pluto, Aquarius. Well, that's powerful. This is a fixed opposition. There's intensity here with Pluto. There's persuasiveness, there's propaganda. There are powerful words being bandied about everywhere, right? Which and whose words have the most power, and why? Why should they? Why do they have power? What is it? What makes language and communication powerful, right? We have to ask ourselves these kinds of questions. The Scorpio ascendant equals Mars Taurus conjunct Uranus Taurus, or we could say equals Pluto Aquarius opposite Mercury Leo, depending on whether you're using traditional or modern. And I like to look at both, right? So again, if we if we break that down, Mars is in Taurus, which ruled by Venus, goes to Venus in Cancer. Venus in Cancer goes to the moon because it's ruled by the moon, and that brings us right back to the moon square Neptune again. So everything brings us back to that, and then it brings us back to Mercury again. So the nodal axis is in Aries and Libra, Venus, Mars, Venus, Mars. How do we find balance? It squares the solar return sun by a couple of degrees. The rulers are Mars and Venus. And Mars and Venus both default to Mercury. There we go again. So, but again, the overall with the nodal axis is how do we find balance when we intuitively, right now in this zeitgeist, we feel that we are out of balance? How do we find that? So we're going to be looking at antidotes, as I said. There are always antidotes, always, in every chart. The MCIC Virgo Pisces equals Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune. Takes us right back again to our language, our communication, the words, and wisdom. Wisdom. How do we find the wisdom? Wisdom in Jupiter and wisdom in Neptune. And we can't forget that Jupiter right now is in Gemini as well. So Jupiter is also accentuating the Mercury function that we're seeing is so highlighted. And so we're inundated, we're overwhelmed. And, we have to find a way to quell the anxiety. So the core pattern and the most exact aspect at the anaretic degree of 29, and I can talk a little bit about the anaretic degree. It is so powerful. It's pivotal. It's a pivot. We're being asked to pivot. We're looking at what has been and we're looking toward what can be, right? It's a pivot point, and it's very, very powerful. And 2 and 9 is 11, and 11 I relate to Aquarius. The 11th sign, just a little bit of my own little numerology that I do. And, it means that we need to kind of shock ourselves out of some kind of lethargy that we've been in and awaken if we have been asleep. So, that's part of the anaretic degree. It's just a quixotic degree and very powerful and kind of, it's kind of hard to grasp, but, it offers hope, but it also offers, again, that kind of anxiety because we just don't know where it's going. And the other thing with the 29th degree, which is what I believe, is that that it's saying we're going in one way, but then it switches because 29, it looks like, okay, 29, 29 Gemini, Pisces, but it is going to switch. So what it looks like in this moment may not be what actually happens. So that's why the 29th degree is very unusual and needs a lot of extra attention. Okay, so, we've talked about this, right here. So these are just slides, and you're certainly welcome to have these slides, this PDF, if you want afterwards, because I'm going to be giving you a lot of information. So Sun Cancer equals Moon Gemini square Neptune Pisces, and then Mercury rules the moon, and Mercury Leo opposite Pluto Aquarius. And that brings us back to Sun Cancer again. And as I said, Mercury dominates, and it's reinforced by even more so by Jupiter being in Gemini, because Jupiter expands everything. It accentuates, it magnifies, it makes everything bigger, and sometimes certainly overwhelms us. But again, what's underneath that is it's asking us to be wise in our communication, in our understanding, in our reason, in our logic, in the words that we hear, the words that we take in, the words that we speak, and how we interpret those words. There's a lot of people talking out there right now about many things. So resolving the pattern, balancing the pattern, or seeking wholeness when you have patterns that are difficult. How do we do that? Well, let's look at this chart again. So the way we do that, when we see a square like this, the wholeness comes from looking at the other mutable signs. So opposite Gemini is Sagittarius. Opposite Pisces is Virgo. Those positions help to bring wholeness to the stress of Moon Neptune. And so Virgo provides the discrimination, the critical thinking, the factuality. Sagittarius brings us, again, the wisdom to broaden, not just to listen to a few words, but to try to understand the concept. What do these, how are these words going to be shaped into a system or a project or something that is more formed, right? Rather a thesis. Well, if you want to borrow from from education, but and again, Sagittarius would be about educating. We can get very, very anxious with that Moon Neptune, but it's incumbent upon us to use Virgo and Sagittarius to educate ourselves and to discriminate, so that we're not overwhelmed or pulled by every wind, by what this person says, what that person says, but that we try to find a place within ourselves, a central place, perhaps meditating, your own spiritual practices. There is dis-ease, and I feel there is an illness in the country right now. And we have to try to heal ourselves from this illness that's going on, that's described by Moon square Neptune. So coming up very quickly is the Mercury retrograde cycle in Virgo. This fills in the open space opposite Neptune Pisces and squares Moon Gemini. So this is where we get our first big dose of an antidote. Now it's still a three-legged pattern, right? But we haven't had this. This is something now that is coming by transit, and it helps us to be more discerning, right? And gives us an antidote to confusion via discrimination, critical thinking, reliable facts. And so this is the best way to use this Mercury retrograde cycle in Virgo. And, here are the stats for that. Mercury enters Virgo on 7/25, so we're very close to this first potential for resolving some of the, conflict and dissociation and dis-ease that is going on in the country. So it enters Virgo on 7/25, turns retrograde on 8/5 at 4 Virgo, very close to the solar return midheaven at 2 Virgo. So this is a particularly important Mercury retrograde for this country's chart, right? I mean, not all Mercury retrogrades are going to be as relevant in anybody's chart. They have to match up with points or planets in the chart, right? So the retrograde cycle fully completes once Mercury leaves Virgo, and that isn't until 9/26. Within this Mercury retrograde cycle, it's a hybrid cycle, meaning that it will retreat back to Leo, right? So it spends time in Leo between 8/14 and 9/9/24. Okay. And then Mercury turns direct on 8/28 at 21 Leo. Okay. So that's our first antidote to that tough square. There is another Mercury retrograde within this year, and that is Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. And we talked about, that if you want to balance out a square, you want to find what I call the phantom legs, because that is, the chart is wholeness. We want to find wholeness. So you find wholeness by filling in the other parts of the square, making the grand square in this case. But you can do that with any aspect. We're going to see a lot of activity in the news, etc., in those areas where there isn't a planet in that square. So it's both the antidote, we can use it as an antidote, but we're also going to see a lot of conversation and activity around Virgo during those times, and also in Sagittarius at this time period. And of course, I mentioned Sagittarius, and you can fill in your own keywords. Sagittarius. But the essence of Sagittarius is to find wisdom by discussion, by understanding, with justice, with informing oneself, with reading, among many other keywords. But here Mercury enters Sag on 11/2. And then Mercury turns retrograde on 11/25 at 22 Sag, closely square Saturn in the solar return chart, and in conjunct Venus in the solar return chart at 21 degrees. So this again is a very important Mercury retrograde cycle for the United States and for its solar return chart. The retrograde cycle fully completes once it leaves Sagittarius on 1/5. Whoops, that should be 25. Check that. And then Mercury turns direct on 12/15 at 6 Sag, in conjunction with a full moon in Gemini at 23 degrees. Now, that's close enough to the solar return moon at 29, but it's additionally important because which we haven't talked about yet because we haven't put the two charts together. But the USA has Mars at 21 Gemini. So again, these degrees are very important for the country. All right, so here now we're doing it this way. We're putting the solar return around the outside of the USA chart, and we're looking at it as a transit chart, which is a transit chart, you know, when it happened, but it becomes a temporary chart for the country afterwards. So here we see that the ascendant of the solar return is in the 11th house. And, you know, I mean, I could talk about asteroids. I mean, there's so much going on here, but, you know, I can't discuss everything. But, you know, Pallas is exactly conjunct the solar return ascendant too, which is asking us to thread the needle, to look critically at the eye of the needle and really try to understand the core of what is going on here. What is really going on? Don't be distracted. Or as I like to say, when I wrote about Neptune at 29, I said, refuse to be confused. Yeah, and it shows up, you know, wonderfully, you know, in the solar return chart with that moon square Neptune. But I invite you to refuse to be confused. Really think of the principles that are at work here, the principles that need our support, our love, our acceptance, etc. And, you know, Pallas is just, again, saying that too. Really look deep, go beneath the surface. Scorpio is about going beneath the surface. Look what's beneath the surface. What is happening here? So the 11th house is being brought front and center in the solar return chart. What does that mean? Well, all the things that we know about the 11th house. I think the next slide talks about that a little bit more. Let me check that. Yeah. Yeah, so the 11th house is the future. Groups of like-minded people, group mind, vision, truth, liberty, fraternity. You know, and again, you can add many, many, many more keywords to this, but, you know, it is the house of the future. It is the house of having a wider vision, of going beyond your immediate needs. It's conceptual, it's wide-reaching, it's international. You know, it's about our evolution as people, our consciousness, you know, and how we want to direct our thinking and our vision into the future, right? That's, you know, that's what the 11th house is about. So this is the house that is, you know, being brought forth in the solar return chart. Now, let's look at the two charts this way with the the inner wheel and the angles are going to be the solar return, and the outer wheel is the chart of the United States, the Sibley chart. So a lot of things become more clear here, right? Right away, we see that the 8th house becomes more dominant. This is what happens when you put the two charts together. You're going to see there's more dominant energy in a certain area, and you're going to see that, you know, some planets are more connected, right? Because of that. And that's a very important part of doing solar return analysis. So we see that the 8th house is dominant. We see that this solar return is actually a Venus return for the sun as well, for the country as well. This is not unusual, okay? Mercury and Venus travel around with the sun a lot, and it's not unusual to get a Venus return as part of the solar return, or even a Mercury return. That's not unusual. But, you know, it's nice. It's nice. So even though it's disposed by that moon, and the moon is showing all of the stress, that the people are stressed out in this country, and many are confused and don't know what to do and are frustrated, and all of the other words that we've already probably used. You know, Venus with the sun here and the solar return is there is a blessing there in that, how can I put it, the goodwill of the people, and people, the majority of people, I think, want goodwill for the country. They want the country to succeed for this coming year, or to do well, right? So we see that, and we also see that Mars, the USA Mars at 21 degrees is very close to the solar return moon. And we're going to be looking to see, there will be, you know, Mars right now is in Taurus. It is going to go into Gemini soon. And then during the solar return for the United States, besides everything else we've already said, is also a Mars return this year for the United States. So that means eventually Mars is going to get to 21 degrees, and then that'll be the exact Mars return of the US, but then it moves on to reach the solar return moon at 29 and trigger that square. So those are the things that we're looking for in the year. You know, what's going to get triggered? What's going to get triggered? And I have a list of things, you know, for us to look at in terms of what gets triggered over the course of the year. We see that Jupiter here, the solar return, Jupiter is practically conjunct the Uranus of the United States. So, you know, all of this is really important, you know, and once Mars goes into Gemini, all of this stuff is going to start kicking off, you know, big time here. All the things we've been talking about that Mars is going to trigger. Mars is the chart ruler. So whatever Mars does in the course of the year is going to be a little bit more important because Mars is the chart ruler, or we could say Pluto. Well, we're going to also look at what Pluto is doing for modern rulership. But, you know, these are the planets that are highlighted, and so we have to watch them very carefully. So you don't get a Mars return in the solar return every year, right? Because Mars only returns to its birthplace every 2 years. So this year we get a Mars return, and you know it's more pivotal because of that square, that moon square Neptune that we have here. So so there's that that we're looking at. We see that the USA Neptune is still kind of opposite the Neptune and the solar return, you know, and this is part of what we've been going through for a number of years, which is the virality of information, you know, through social media, through all kinds of platforms, etc., you know, and the inundation of information and you know, which causes distress and difficulty in sorting. I wouldn't consider Neptune and Virgo to be particularly good at sorting, right? It actually, you know, can get overwhelmed, you know, in its own way with facts and figures and so forth. One more thing I want to say about the Mars return that we're seeing in this solar return year is that, you know, in the USA chart, Mars is square Neptune. That's a very tight square. I call that the Achilles heel of the United States, you know, because of the tendency that we have had at various times in our history to get lost in the weeds and to start something with a kind of an ideal and then it kind of falls apart, and it doesn't go the way that we think it does. It's also our preoccupation with glamour, with Hollywood, with glitz, with so it's I call it the Achilles heel, because there's a lot that has to be resolved there, and we don't always do it effectively, right? Nothing wrong with Hollywood, nothing wrong with film and music, and a lot of we're known for a lot of those things across the world, and technology, but sometimes when there is too much of an emphasis on one aspect of that, then we get into trouble with that square. So this Neptune also plays into the moon square Neptune in the solar return, and may or may not really help us as much as maybe another planet in Virgo, like Mercury coming up. Mercury is strong in Virgo. So I hope that we can use that Mercury retrograde cycle to help us dismantle and reorganize our thinking and understand ourselves and what is happening in the country in a better way. The other thing we see here is that the moon, the US moon, is 27 Aquarius, and it is trine the solar return moon. So that's good. So this is a good part of that square, in that the Gemini moon also operates on reason, right? I mean, that would be if we can reason out the things that are happening, then we're really operating according to our natal moon Aquarius, which is to get the bigger picture, to be more logical rather than just to be overly emotional, right? This is kind of an antidote to that 8th house Scorpio ascendant here. So to bring reason into things, to broaden, to widen the picture, to look at all of the details, all of the ideas, and then to sort them and to discriminate. We also see that the USA Pluto is exactly semi-sextile the USA moon, very important, and we're just past our exact Pluto return, which hasn't happened in 248 years. And we see that Pluto is in conjunct the solar return moon. So again, we're feeling the pressure of, we're feeling that cycles are ending. There is something that is ending in our country, or a better way to say it, perhaps, we just need to do things differently. We really need to look at what has been going on and what we've taken for granted in this country, and find other methodologies to move forward, right? The other really important thing that is going to happen in this solar return year is that Pluto will move to 29 degrees, and I'll give you dates, for that. But it will leave Capricorn in this solar return year, not to ever return for another 248 years. And before it does that, of course, it makes an exact inconjunct to the solar return moon. So these are really important features of what's happening this year. I mean, I could go on, there's more, and I have other things I want to point out to you. Let me see if there's something else briefly that I want to touch on, but we can always go back to the chart too. So I want to talk about the 29 degrees that are very prevalent both in the solar return chart and in the coming year And I already I already made you aware of one thing, which is Pluto going back to 29 and then leaving for good and moving into Aquarius, not to return to Capricorn. This is all happening, this year. So on 9/1, Pluto returns to 29 Capricorn and sextiles Neptune at 29 degrees. And that's only for a couple of days. They make an exact sextile. So Neptune has been at 29 degrees since before the solar return. It's hovering at 29 degrees and just made a station, at 29 degrees, I believe on the 2nd of July, just right before the US solar return. So now Neptune is coming back to 29 and is going to stimulate, what Neptune has been gathering and what Neptune has been absorbing and dealing with, right? So these are interesting days to watch, and it's only a few days when they're making that exact sextile, but right around that day is really relevant. And you can see here that it extends a little bit, because on 9/4 Mars reaches 29 degrees, Mars in Gemini. So, we're getting a lot of connections here to 29 degrees. And of course, we know how important 29 degrees is this year, because it's that moon square to Neptune, the moon dispositing the sun in Cancer. Very, very powerful. On 1/11/25, there's a nodal sign change. And we get 29 Pisces Virgo, because it leaves Aries Libra. So again, 29 degrees. This is important, right? Why? Because it's right there on the USA Neptune at 29 degrees, squaring the USA solar return moon, right? Anytime something's at 29, it's going to trigger that part of the chart. Same thing on 5/13. Saturn in Pisces reaches 29 degrees. So Saturn conjuncts Neptune. So Saturn, it's just a really kind of misnomer kind of energy. It's kind of, Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And now Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And it's like, okay, what have you learned? How can you bring structure, when things have gone out of bounds, right? Pisces, is boundless unless it gets some kind of a boundary put around it, or when you create a boundary for yourself or rules for yourself of behavior, etc. So this is an important moment again. Saturn Pisces reaching 29 degrees and conjuncting the USA solar return Neptune and squaring the USA solar return moon. 6/5/25, Jupiter reaches 29 degrees of Gemini, right on the USA moon. So, these are very close by to each other here. So this cycle right here, this time frame, this time band here, becomes very important. Again, there's a lot going on there, and we have work to do here concerning, what's important to us, how we feel at that time. Have we recovered, from our anxiety? Are there more anxieties that we have to deal with? How are we going to deal with them? Is Saturn helping us at that time to kind of organize, the issues that we feel? and organize the disorganization that we feel, right? I mean, that's what Saturn's purpose in Pisces is to kind of sort, if you're in the fun house, if you're in the maze, you have to try to figure your way out, right? Figure your way out of the fog, out of depression, melancholy, anxiety, stress, strain, all of the, Piscean things that can happen, and find a way to illuminate, to lift yourself up, to find way, and I definitely, what's important this year, and we're all citizens here, most of us citizens of the country here, and of course affects the world too, what we're doing, because we're such a big player on the world stage. So, how we feel and how we manage our faith and how we inspire ourselves, or listening to people who inspire us, whose words inspire, whose communications inspire us to our better nature, right? Isn't that, what we're here to do, is just to live in a way that is respectful of everyone. I mean, what's the ultimate goal, right, of being alive on the planet, right? And taking care of the planet that we live on, the planet that is our foundation, right? We're standing on it. It's all of these things. These are very big questions, right? And that's why I think it's so confusing, because they're such big questions. They're not necessarily the questions you ask, every day of your life. Do I have enough food? I have to get the car fixed. I've got to, take care of my kids, and take them to school. Yes, but these larger cosmic questions are influencing those daily tasks. They're either making them harder because we're upset or depressed or worried. So we have to joggle between the two and try to understand, how we can be better citizens of the world. How can we lift up the energies? I mean, we're astrologers here. And we're supposed to reach higher, right? I mean, when you have clients, you're trying to help them to manifest, the best expression of their energy. Well, same thing here. The solar return is asking that too. How can we reach higher? How can we re-inspire ourselves? How can we remain inspired? How can we have a vision that is honorable and supports all people to being able to live their lives freely and joyfully, right? So these are important 29-degree triggers here, right here. So these degrees are very important this year. As I've already talked about the 29th degree, I haven't so much talked about the 27th degree, but the 27th degree is very close to the 29th. And the 27th degree is very important because it is the degree of the USA natal moon and the degree of the USA Pluto, 27. So, when something's happening at 29, right before then, it's also happening at 27, right? So we have to remember that. That's why you put the two charts together. 3 degrees is a very important degree also, and I haven't talked about that yet, and I will. 3 degrees is the Mercury degree, 3 degrees Leo in the solar return chart. And when that gets triggered, we're looking for triggers. So that will be important. Why? Because Mercury is such an important planet this year in the solar return. That's why we're focusing on those planets. So here is a listing of, I think I mentioned earlier, we're looking in the solar return about which key aspects will perfect in the coming year, right? Which applying aspects become exact. So Mars conjunct Uranus, that's 7/14 to 16, coming right up, boom, big display, big something or other, right? That's just the way Uranus works. Certainly if it's important in your chart, you want to be aware that you might have your head in the clouds and not know where you're going. So be careful, because it has an accidental quality to it. When Mars Gemini conjuncts a solar return moon, I talked about that. 9/3 to 9/5 approximately. I always give a little around the edges. Whenever I give you a time, you need to kind of look at a little bit before, a little after, because that's the way the planets don't always work exactly at clockwork. There's a range, right? So and as I said here, 20, in this case 21 degrees is important, so that happens slightly before that time, when the USA has its exact Mars return at 21 degrees. Now here, number 3 here, the Sun in Scorpio triggers the solar return Mercury in Leo, which is opposite Pluto in Aquarius, and that's 10/23 to 10/26. So that's important. And we talked about antidotes, right? We haven't specifically talked about antidotes to that major opposition, but this would be an antidote here, because the Sun in Scorpio would be squaring that opposition, right? So, and we have a Scorpio ascendant, right? So this is kind of going to be in the 12th house of the solar return, because the solar return Mercury is at 3 degrees, and the ascendant is 19, I believe. So, again, we're being asked to look beneath the surface and how we express power, how we express empowerment, how we deal with our resources. Scorpio is resources. Scorpio is resourceful. So, and resources covers a lot of ground. Sure, resources have to do with money. Yeah, of course. But all resources, everything, our energy is a resource, right? The energy that we bring to bear on something is a resource that we have to give, right? That we have to share, right? Our love, the energy, our mental capacities, these are resources we have, not just money or land, right? So that's an important trigger. And then this is an important time period when Pluto, which we saw as being retrograde in the solar return chart at 1 degree, when Pluto opposes Mercury in Leo at 3 degrees in the solar return chart. And that happens between 3, 6, and 7, 8, 25. That's long, and it happens past the next USA solar return. This is a very important moment, just like the Neptune at 29 degrees, which we've had since trying to think, since early, the second week in May, I believe Neptune went to 29 degrees and doesn't leave 29, until September 3rd or something like that. So, I mean, these long stretches, that click in to charts are really important, and not just for charts, but just overall in the zeitgeist. They're really powerful when these outer planets are just hovering at a particular degree. Well, Pluto does it at 3 degrees next year. And then it makes a station on 5/4 at 3 degrees, but it remains at 3 degrees during this whole time from 3/6 to 7/8, 25. So you can be sure that there is a lot that is going to be going on in the United States this entire year of the solar return, and during these moments, these trigger moments in the chart. I mentioned, I think, Saturn and Pisces before. Saturn conjunct Neptune and square the moon, and the dates for that, 5/13 to 5/26. And Saturn reaches 29 degrees in that time frame here. Okay, what else do I have for you? Okay, these are kind of lists and hotspots, some of which we've discussed, and these, this can be for your information, because you can have these slides if you want them. But here are some other important features. For instance, 8/7/24 is Uranus reaches 27 degrees of Taurus, and that's also its station degree, but it reaches 27 Taurus. And that is important because 27 degrees, as you know, is the degree of the USA moon. So this would be a square to the USA moon, and an trine to the USA Pluto at 27. Very, very important. We also kind of want to watch the Jupiter square Saturn. There are two of them. 17 degrees doesn't fully click in, but close enough, because we have a 19-degree planet. But on the same day, 8/19, there's a full moon at 27 Aquarius, which is the USA moon, right? Okay, and Sun in Leo squares Uranus Taurus on that day as well. So we're looking here at, August here, very important, because 8/31 to 9/5 at the end of August, Mars is between 27 and 29, which we already discussed, as being really important. And even before then, Mars at 21 is the exact solar return. The exact Mars return of the US. So you can see right now that August, of course, is going to be really important. 9/1 Uranus makes a station. I talked about 9/1/9/2 because Pluto re-enters Capricorn at 29. But Uranus makes its station there. So, it reaches 29 on 8/7 and makes a station at 27. All very important. Planetary stations are big, big points of focus, really big messages, planetary stations. 9/1 to 9/2, I mentioned this, the Pluto sextile Neptune at 29. 10/9, Jupiter and Gemini. Jupiter and Gemini solar. What did I do here? 21 degrees. Jupiter and Gemini. That's actually the USA Mars. Jupiter and Gemini at 21 is the degree of the USA Mars at 21. So that's an important point. Again, it's going to augment, exaggerate, and stimulate the USA Mars. And we have a lot going on in this country. We have a couple of wars going on. We have a presidential election. So you can see, where the hot spots are. Now here on 12/6, Mars in Leo, we also have within this year a Mars retrograde. Again, it doesn't happen every year because Mars goes retrograde about every couple years. And Mars in Leo makes a station retrograde on December 6th at 6 degrees. 6 degrees is the north node of the United States. So again, it's like we have a lot to figure out this year, a lot. And it's not going to be easy, but we have help. If we use the antidotes that we have, instead of, feeding into the anxiety, then we can find our way. We can find our way. But this is very important. The North Node, Mars and Leo retrograde, station retrograde on the North Node of the country. Very powerful. On 12/7, Neptune makes a station retrograde at 27. This is semi-sextile. The USA moon, I only use semi-sextiles if they're exact. This one is exact. And it makes a sextile to the USA Pluto at 27. And then here we have the second Jupiter-Saturn square. All right, just have one more slide. And again, this is more for your own research. I just list here, the whole Mars retrograde cycle here for you here. Mars enters Leo on 11/3/24. Does that ring a bell for anybody? 11/3, right before the election. And then it goes on and on. Mars Leo conjunct solar return Mercury, 11/14-19, Mars station retrograde, which I mentioned, Mars station direct at 17 Cancer. Mars enters Leo again 4/18/25, Mars conjunct solar return Mercury 4/25/25. This is also important. Mars conjuncting the solar return Mercury. So there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that we have to pay attention to. We have to remain alert and be reasonable, use our reason, our logic, as well as our instinct, right? Logic and instinct, right? Because we said Mercury is really big, but Mercury is, there's an 8th house influence going on as well. So reason and logic is one thing, but we have to combine it with our deepest instincts. What is really going on? What is beneath the surface that maybe we're not paying attention to? So, here's the other Mercury retrograde that happens. I talked about these two as being very powerful. This one is a little bit less powerful. It doesn't click in quite as powerfully as the other two. It's in Aries and Pisces. And then, I talked about the nodal sign change that happens in January. And then, I talked about Pluto at 3 degrees Aquarius, and there is an eclipse too. The eclipse, and there are other eclipses that were earlier this year that would probably also still be relevant. But this one is important because it's very close to the USA Neptune. This one here, 3/14, total lunar eclipse. Let's see, and I talked about all this, Neptune returning to 29 Pisces, 3/4. So all of this, these are just stats for you that you can watch yourself. 6/12 Mars in Leo is at 27 degrees, which is exactly opposite the USA moon. So so I'm going to leave you here with some quotes, hopefully that will inspire you here. I hope some of these will inspire you. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. That's Lao Tzu. Stop the habit of wishful thinking and start the habit of thoughtful wishes. Mary Martin said that. And then the Septima Poinsett Clark, I have great belief in the fact that whenever there is chaos, it creates wonderful thinking. I consider chaos a gift. So there's a lot here. This one too. The only hope I can see for the future depends on a wiser and braver use of the reason, not a panic flight from it. So I'm certainly happy to take any questions at this point.
Okay, we have a few. We have 10, actually. We have 10 questions.
Okay.
So. And do you have your contact information on that last slide, just in case people want to?
I do. Yeah, I do a lot of writing on Substack. I've transferred my newsletter that I've been writing for 27 years to Substack. So I do a lot of writing there. Usually I do an article a week. It's free to sign up. Of course, support is lovely if you can, but there's a lot of free material there. And yeah, so
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So you can take a screenshot of that if you want to get in contact with Dorothy or follow her on Substack. I'm going to just start from the top. The first question is, would you talk about the Mars-Uranus conjunction with Algol next week and how it affects the US chart?
Yeah. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, very, very powerful, the fixed star, that I think in a way we have been losing our heads, which again, and Taurus is the throat, rules the throat. And it's like there's so much emotion going on that we're kind of overwhelmed. So I think it's easy for people to really, kind of metaphorically lose their heads. And I think certainly, the male energies are very dominant right now, because the candidates we have are male. And so there's a lot of, kind of over the top kind of energy and everywhere that we see. So I would just look at it that way, that we're just kind of losing our heads, and we need to kind of calm down and, look at what's really relevant and important.
Thank you. Next question. Do you consider 18 degrees as a danger degree that can involve many people or the masses? And
a danger degree?
18 degrees. 18.
I haven't heard that. So I'm not sure what that's from, but I'm not aware of that at this point in time.
Okay. The next question is about the 29 anaretic degree and what the difference would be in a natal chart versus a solar return or transit chart.
Completely different in a natal chart, in the sense that you have way more control of your own energies than the entire world or a country. There's a lot that's out of control for us in the country. We're just trying to do our best with the bureaucracy, with the systems that are in place. But the 29th degree is kind of a release degree. So there, depending on where it is and what else is going on, there's, there can be a lot of joy and release, but it is, it is thinking ahead. It's moving into the next sign. So I think it is a powerful degree wherever it shows up in the natal chart. It's kind of an exciting degree, but at times it can mean that, you're not sure exactly, where you want to go. You're going somewhere, but yet you're still also kind of trying to understand the last 28 degrees of what has been going on. So it's like an accumulation and a release at the same time. I think for some people it can be a very a degree of great understanding, of really understanding something really well, as you're completing something and going somewhere else.
Thank you for that. Next question is, what software were you using?
Oh, Solar Fire.
Okay. And then a couple of people were wondering what settings you were using, because they were getting just slightly different degrees. And I know some settings can do that in Solar Fire. I've experienced that, so I know that happens.
Interesting.
Like a parallax or sometimes a true mean. Sometimes things like that can throw.
Yeah, I do use the true node. So I'm pretty sure I used the true node. Yeah, I haven't looked recently. Yeah, I don't know. If it's just within a couple of minutes, I wouldn't worry about it. You know, if it's a degree, you know, that would be more important. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. The next question is, if 29 and 27 degrees are important, how does the 29-degree Jupiter Cancer and 27 Uranus express itself? So looking at that, I'm not sure if it was the solar return to the US chart that they're talking about, but does that make sense to you?
27 would be to the US chart. So Uranus, 27 degrees to the US moon is, you know, that's a big kind of like upset, some kind of big, you know, upset, I guess, or potential distress of some kind, you know, where the emotions are really riled up there with Uranus square the moon. So we know that, you know, there's a lot of potential for upset in the country right now. We know that. So when we see these coming up, we do have to be aware and be careful and you know, and try to understand, you know, the country is trying to find its footing for the next, certainly for the next year, and it may even be for the next many years. You know, it's hard to say exactly, but I believe that is what is going on. And then what was the other one? The Neptune at 29?
Yeah,
No.
it was, no, it was Jupiter,
Yeah.
29 Jupiter Cancer and 27 Uranus Cancer.
Yeah, Jupiter at 29. Yeah, well, that's going to be right on the solar return moon, which plays back to the solar return sun. So again, it's an excess of words, an excess of ideas, you know, and people get overwhelmed, or with Uranus and Jupiter, they can get very agitated and because of either what is said, how it's said, you know, how it plays out. And of course, Jupiter is always, to some extent, the courts, right? So we have to consider that, and we have to consider, you know, that all the Mercury energy that we talked about. I mean, there's so much dismantle in the chart. You know, I wanted to give you some highlights, but there is so much, and I would love to talk more about asteroids too, but there's just so much in the chart. So we have to remember that anytime we have Mercury dominant and we have Jupiter in Gemini rule, you know, disposed of by Mercury, the courts, really a big deal in this country right now. You know, we have to kind of figure out whether we want the court to, how we want the court to function, you know, going forward. There are a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. Okay, next question is, have you looked at the Sibley Demi solar for 2024?
The demi-solar, no. I have a good friend, colleague who does that, the demi-solars, but I don't do them, so.
There's a lunar eclipse 25 degrees Pisces in September. Do you see that as important in the solar return chart?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's only 4 degrees away. Yes, very important. So, you know, we're leading up to the election. You know, a lot of crazy things are going to happen. We have to expect it. It's just par for the course for all of our elections, more so this year. Crazy things will continue to happen. You know, I didn't talk about Moon Neptune as, you know, a lot of things coming out of the woodwork that we don't yet know about. That's always the case anytime you have Pisces or Neptune involved. That there's a lot of things that we don't know yet that are likely to come out when those planets are getting re-triggered, or that place in the chart is getting re-triggered. Yes, very, very powerful. Eclipses always. And eclipses, you know, they sometimes don't manifest right on the day, but they form a backdrop energy, you know, that we should pay attention to. So that is very important. Again, you know, what do you believe? Pisces, what do you believe? What's your vision, as a citizen? What is your vision of the country? And how can you play into that vision of the country? What can you do as an individual, right? I mean, that's what we have to ask ourselves, because, we can't all, move mountains, but everyone can do something.
Okay. This question is about the semi-sextile, and you said you use it only if it's exact. And Diane would like to know if you use exact by degree or exact by minute.
Degree.
Okay. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
The next one is about the presentation. So what's going to happen is Dorothy's going to send me the slides or give me a link to the slides. And once this replay is published on our YouTube channel, we will send you an email with a link to the replay and a link to the slides.
Yes, I will provide the slides. Yeah, just let me know where to send them, and I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay. This next question is if you would talk more about why you chose the Sibley chart over some of the other ones. I know you mentioned it at the beginning, but I think some people may have joined us a little later.
Right. Well, I did research, his history, like when the signers met and so forth. So they met, they were disbanding in the late afternoon. I did this research quite a while ago. So I chose the Sibley chart, which I believe is 5:10. I can't quite remember exactly right now, 5:10 p.m. But what really nailed it for me was the event of 9/11, because the USA chart has 12 Sagittarius rising, and Pluto was, within a degree of that ascendant, and that just, confirmed it for me that was the chart to use. Because I mean, that was such an astounding event. We'd never had an attack, within our country like that before. And, what could be more powerful than Pluto on the ascendant of a country?
Thank you. Do you see the Pallas Athena prominence as a woman in the White House? Or is that possible? Yeah. I think this is a more broad question, because I know we're not really getting into specific candidates, but would you look to Pallas Athena for maybe a female candidate?
I think you could consider it, of course, but I think you'd have to look at a lot of other things as well. I mean, in the case of where Pallas Athena is, right on the ascendant, I mean, I think we're already seeing the influence of women, really having gained a lot of traction. And we didn't even, we didn't touch really on issues, but we know that with the Scorpio rising and the Pallas right there and the 8th house and the moon square Neptune, we know that women's issues are part and parcel of this election and this coming year. So I would answer it that way. I think the other question is a lot more complex.
Yeah. Okay. And so we know that the moon can represent the people in the country. So this question is, what does Mars represent in a mundane chart as opposed to a natal chart?
Mars is the action, so we watch what Mars does through the years, through the year. It's the actions that are taken. It's the initiation. It's the issues that are triggered at any given time. And because Mars is also very important in the solar return, because it's the traditional ruler of the ascendant, and it's on the descendant. So, it's an issue laden year, right? So, and then, so in general, it's the action that is being taken, but to some extent, we can also say males in the chart. So, we do have two powerful males, right? I mean, we have two powerful males that have Mars in fixed signs, and we have in the solar return Mars in a fixed sign. So Mars is leadership, it's initiation, it's action. I don't think in and of itself, it has to do with the ruler, but to some extent it does have to do with the ruler.
Got it. Okay, we've made it through all the questions.
Yay!
Yay! So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks to our regulars who join us regularly. I want to thank Ray for helping out in the chat box, and a huge thank you to Dorothy. I don't know if you've seen any of the praise, but there's a lot of praise. Don't worry, I'll get you the chat box so you can see the messages from everyone, but you can see the hearts and the hands.
Oh, I see those. Yes, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. We will get you an email with the replay and with the slides next week. Give us a little bit of time to get that together, but we will certainly get it out to you. So thank you again. Thank you, Dorothy. And we hope to see you soon. Oh, I do want to say, Dorothy, you're teaching in the fall. So
Yes.
if you want to learn with Dorothy, one of her specialties is relationship charts, the Davison compatibility chart, and she's going to be teaching. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yes, I'll be doing a 5-week course. It's kind of part 2 of my Illuminating Relationships. Part 1 I've done for Kepler before. This one specifically focuses on the composite and Davison, the combined charts. So I'm very excited about it. I'm developing, finishing developing the course right now. So hope to see some of you there, perhaps. Yeah. And before we all go, I just want to very much thank you and Kepler for, I really enjoyed presenting this for you, and I thank you for being here and listening.
Yeah. All righty. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.